What is up? Big day today. We got a red flag in 49er land. Might be a good day if you're an Eagle fan. We have Tom Brady. Was it the Patriot Way or the Brady Way? Read an article and want to dive into that, as well as some other stuff around the NFL. Thursday night game, I think will reflect why the NFL's king, Al Michaels, said he's not going anywhere and much more. But before we dive into anything football-wise, here's what I need you to do. I need you to subscribe to the podcast, wherever you may listen. Apple, iTunes, same thing. Spotify, we got you covered. If you're watching this on YouTube, hammer that like button, subscribe to the page, as well as leave a comment below, share with your friends, share with your enemies. Thevolume.com, we have merchandise. I got three and out hats. Go to thevolume.com. And before we dive into anything football-wise, here's what I need you to do. I need you to grab your phone. I need you to download an app. It's called the Gametime app. It's the official ticketing app of this podcast. Fastest growing ticketing app in America. You can go to anything. You can go to football games, college or pro, basketball games, college or pro, hockey games. I'm a big hockey guy. Went to my first game this year. It was awesome. I would highly recommend it. Concerts, comedy shows. Get out. Enjoy the world. Download that Gametime app. Subscribe or buy a pair of tickets. Your first pair of tickets when you use the promo code JOHN, John, John. That's my name. $20 off. Cannot recommend it enough. Very easy to do. Gametime app, promo code John, $20 off your first pair of tickets. Okay, let's dive into something football-wise. I've always been a big proponent of not believing anything coaches say and thinking a lot of stuff with press conferences you have to take with a grain of salt. You know, their job in terms of talking to the press and their job in terms of behind closed doors talking to their teams are two separate things. And I'm always cognizant of that when coaches talk, and why I don't hold them to super high standards for not telling the truth and bullshitting. It's kind of their job. They have to protect players when people screw up or protect coaches. It is what it is. And then a couple weeks ago, Kyle Shanahan, who is one of the more candid, I would say, open coaches, and maybe it's just a lot of the younger guys are, but I don't listen enough to LaFleur and McVay to really validate that theory. But I know with Kyle, for the most part, he's very honest after games, during the week. And he said something a couple weeks ago, just crushing his defensive coordinator. He said Steve Wilks would like to have that call back, and simply put, it's not an acceptable call in the situation. Now, granted, this was a call against the Minnesota Vikings, not at the end of the game, not a play call that cost him a touchdown in the fourth quarter. This was at the end of the first half. They ran a zero blitz, left his corner, who's highly paid, $15 million a year, Charvarius Ward, in one-on-one coverage with a rookie. The ball went right through his hands. Jordan Addison catches the ball, takes to the house, and, proved to be a pretty big play. In the grand scheme of things in the game, there was still a half to be played. But the moment he did that, and he basically threw the guy under the bus, even though the way coaches talk behind closed doors to their other coaches, to their players, definitely can be uncomfortable. They have uncomfortable conversations. The NFL is a sport full of being uncomfortable, 24/7, 365. As an assistant coach, as a player, as a head coach, as a GM, as an exec, as a scout, part of the business comes with the territory. But publicly, for the most part, it's why we crushed Zach Wilson last year when he wouldn't take accountability. It's not even that you're pointing the finger at you. It's just that you're not pointing the finger at anyone else. Right? It's all kind of stupid when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but that's why the coaches and the quarterbacks typically take all the responsibility. They're the highest paid guys. They're the most public figures, and they just take the shine in terms of a negative light off everyone else. And when Kyle Shanahan did that, I immediately theorized. He's not doing that because of us on the outside, the fans, the media, whatever. He's doing that because his players are starting to turn on this guy. His star players on that side of the ball, one of the better units over the last, 4 or 5 years, aren't feeling this and aren't on board with what's going on. And they've had back-to-back coordinators in Robert Saleh and DeMeco Ryans go on to be head coaches, but pretty unique figures when they were in the organization. They were both on the sideline. I would say they had this younger, obviously both guys are younger, but this vibe to them that just was perfect. DeMeco did play in the league. Robert Saleh feels like a former NFL player. Their energy was palpable. And clearly they knew these guys really well. I mean, D'Amico came in with Saleh as a quality control guy, worked his way up as a position coach, and ultimately became the coordinator. And then today it was announced that Steve Wilks will go from the booth to the field, where obviously D'Amico Ryans and Robert Saleh was. To me, it reflects back to what Kyle Shanahan did by throwing this guy under the bus publicly to show his players that I have your back. The next day, then Steve Wilks, before he's even asked a question in his weekly press conference, he goes, I would like that one back. I screwed up. I said, what is going on? I've been following NFL press conferences forever. This is the type of shit that happens to a winless team, to a team that's going to be drafting in the top 5, not a Super Bowl contender. They got a problem. And I thought before it actually happened, I thought this guy might get fired during the bye week. Now, they don't have anyone on staff to take his job, but him coming from the booth to the sideline, this is not some 33-year-old first-time coordinator. This is a guy who's been in the league almost 2 decades. This is a guy that almost just became the head coach for a second time, full-time with the Carolina Panthers. So, to me, this is just not going well. And I know statistically through the Dallas game when they were 5-0, their defense was awesome. But clearly there is a line of communication where not everyone's on the same page. And to me, it starts with Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. They ain't feeling this guy because you don't make changes like this when you're winning with a veteran coach if things aren't weird. And they wanted to hire Vic Fangio, but Kyle, hesitated to change his defense. Vic's more of a 3-4 guy, and they run a true 4-3 defense. What Pete Carroll, it's morphed over the years, but a 4-3 zone defense. And Dante Whitner, who played for the Niners, who now does stuff locally, and Richard Sherman has talked about this, said Steve has tried to mesh a lot of man concepts with zone concepts, and everything's off kilter. Everything's out of whack. And when you're an elite team with highly paid guys, literally the highest paid defensive end, the best middle linebacker, star players surrounding them, and you're in win now mode, there's no margin for error. So to me, Steve Wilks unofficially a couple weeks ago, his clock started. Like he's going to be one and done as a defensive coordinator. Now it's official. Because let's face it, let's use the Cowboys as an example. Whether the defense fucks up or not, Mike McCarthy would never throw Dan Quinn publicly under the bus. 1, he respects him too much, knows how good he is. And 2, you just don't do that to somebody. But he started doing it last year at the end of the season to who? Kellen Moore. What happened? It was clear by the time the season ended, Kellen Moore wasn't going to be on the Cowboys. So the moment you start publicly pulling the bus and driving it over one of your assistant coaches, it's over. If you don't win big. So to me, the only way Steve Wilks survived, I think they'd have to win the NFC Championship game. And if their defense underwhelms as the season progresses or in the playoffs, adios. It's over. They already told you. This is not college football. You don't do things like this. Even going back to a couple weeks ago, you don't publicly drive the bus over your assistant, but you do when you lose belief in them. And listen, that's part of life. Part of me believing in you in a production-based business is you producing. This is very black and white. This is not a complicated industry. You either win or you don't. You either play good defense or you don't, right? And right now, the 49ers are losing and playing poor defense, and all eyes are on Steve Wilks moving forward. NBA fans, the wait is over. Basketball is back, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA, is celebrating with an unbeatable offer. New customers can score $200 instantly in bonus bets for throwing down $5 on the NBA. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. You'll start the season with an instant dub. And with DraftKings parlays, everyone's got a shot at even bigger basketball wins. String together multiple bets from the same game or build your parlay across multiple games for a shot at making your payday even sweeter. Basketball's more fun when you're in on the action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code JOHN. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets instantly for betting just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Charles Robinson, who's covered the NFL for as long as I've been around it and definitely talked about it, wrote a long article today. And I would say the premise of it was it was never the Patriot way It was the Brady way. And he kind of concluded the article that if Bill would have gotten his way and been able to transition and get rid of Brady in like 17, 18 and go to Jimmy Garoppolo, that it would have also ended like this. And I'd push back a little bit. I think that version of Jimmy is a lot version than the guy that we see that just got Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler relieved of their duties. But I don't disagree with him because I would argue, beside Bill Parcells, in my lifetime, all the coaches who have been quote unquote big time have had a star quarterback. Bill Parcells is the only guy, and he happened to have, I don't know, the greatest defensive player in the history of the league, essentially as his quarterback in Lawrence Taylor. But from Walsh to Montana, to Holmgren to Favre, to now Andy with Mahomes and Belichick and Brady, to become an all-time great, to become a Hall of Fame level guy, you have to have a Hall of Fame level quarterback. Now, and part of that typically is not just their play, but their character, their leadership. Like Favre, young Favre, the Holmgren version, was beloved, got along with everybody, was the heartbeat of that team. Joe Montana, buddies with everyone on the squad. So when you get the total package, the player, the character, we've talked about this with Joe Burrow, your organization becomes a rocket ship. Let's say the Bengals win a Super Bowl this year, and Zach Taylor has on his resume 3 straight conference championship games, a Super Bowl appearance, and a Super Bowl championship. Like, let's face it, Google how many guys have that resume. Not many. And this gets back to, you can only do that with a great quarterback. I will defend Belichick, unlike McDaniels and Patricia and Judge and a lot of these coaches who you wouldn't want in 50 miles of your team if you're a fan, an owner, or a general manager. I do think Bill, if you give him a capable quarterback, has proven over and over and over again that he can win, that he can build the team, that he can function as a GM and as a coach. Now, at 71, 72 years old, has he lost his touch? Has he lost a lot of coaches? Is it not the same? 100%. But the Patriot way, of course it was the Belichick way, or excuse me, the Brady way. The Chiefs were pretty good when they had Alex Smith. They became a fucking powerhouse with Mahomes. Did Andy just all of a sudden get smarter? No, right? Is Phil Jackson the greatest basketball mind of all time? Or does he benefit from being able to have Kobe, Shaq, Michael? Like, part of being a great coach is having a great player. And usually when your great player is also your most competitive, your best leader, it all funnels down. Antonio Pierce said this the other day when he took over, and he talked about in his experience with the Super Bowl team. He said the best teams are player-run operations. The best operations, what do they always say about successful companies? They're not about the walls on the outside. They're about the people on the inside. It's no different with a football team. It just happens to be that position has such a extraordinary amount of power, of juice, of eyeballs on them. So when you get the right guy, it's why we talk about it so much during the draft. It's why this quarterback draft it's why everyone, the moment Caleb Williams went and cried with his mom, everyone had a fucking opinion. If that was Marvin Harrison Jr. or, the wide receiver from Florida State, I'm just trying to think of some of the top prospects, the offensive lineman from Arizona or Penn State, no one would even have talked about it, wouldn't even have noticed. But it was Caleb Williams. If that would have been Drake May or Michael Penix, it would have been the same thing. Everyone would have had a take. Is this guy tough enough to be your starting quarterback? No one gives a shit when it's your guard, right? Or your running back. It would have been like, the guy's emotional, man. His mom, that's a cool moment. But when it's quarterback, everyone's nitpicking. Is this guy mentally tough enough to be the leader of a franchise? That's why everyone's shorting Mac Jones. Just not good enough. Whiny, country club kid, not talented enough. You will lose. If Andy Reid had Mac Jones, or Kyle Shanahan had Mac Jones, or Pete Carroll had Mac Jones, guess what? They would have issues. It would not be going well. Whenever I hear this notion that Mac Jones would have been fine on the 49ers, I want to throw up in my mouth. Maybe it would have looked better than it has in New England because they have more talent around them. But they by no means would be as good as they were a couple years ago with Jimmy, and now they are with Purdy. Because those guys are way better players than him. That's not an opinion. That's an objective fact. And I said it when the season started. Mac Jones was going to get everyone fired. Bill didn't become an idiot overnight. Now, his staff has gotten worse over the years, but Mac Jones was his problem. If you gave Bill Belichick, let's just pick Kirk Cousins, they're competing to be a wild card team. And you're like, God, that's a feisty little squad. But you give them a shitty quarterback, just like you give any coach a shitty quarterback, you're going to lose. So, of course, the Patriot way was the Brady way. Is the Chiefs way the Mahomes way, right? I mean, that's the way it works. That's part of the deal. Not that Bill didn't have a huge say in that as well, but without that guy, you have no way. You just lose. That's the way it works in football. I was thinking about this today because I was listening to this to some of Bill Simmons' podcast at the gym, and I love it when Windhorse has been talking about this forever. I actually listen to a lot more NBA content. Like, I don't really watch NBA games. Simmons and some Warriors podcasts. Like, I actually listen to a lot of NBA podcasts. Jason Timpf here on the Volume does a good job. Obviously, Draymond, when he's rocking and rolling, it can be pretty entertaining. And Simmons was just crushing Adam Silver, who's the worst commissioner in the history of the league. And I mean, they've lost half their audience. The league is much more powerful as a podcast entity, as a YouTube entity, than it actually is as a television product. And I was thinking, like, the NFL has a lot of advantages in 2023 relative to the other two sports. Baseball, you play every day. Like, I'm sorry, too much is going on. We have such small attention spans. There's too much to do. We got too many fucking options. Unless you're the ultimate seam head, you're not sniffing more than like a game a week. You're just not. The average person, and the ratings reflect that. Same thing with the NBA. If I took the two worst teams, I saw my guy Ethan Sherwood Strauss has a fantastic Substack, and he writes about how in trouble the NBA is with their future television deal, right? And just the way television has changed dramatically, and just relative to their numbers, like, they're not going to get what they think they're going to get financially. And honestly, it could be worse. Could be the first media deal that goes down, or at least stays the same. They're not doubling or tripling it. Like, that ship has passed. And part of it is because you can't take two random teams who are terrible and put it on TV and expect anyone to care and expect anyone to watch, because they don't in baseball or basketball. When you put two shitty teams on television, the consumer does not sit on his couch and give you his time, which is by far, I mean, honestly, it's the most valuable thing we have in life. But for a lot of these businesses, especially these pro sports league, the most valuable thing you can give them is your time to watch their game. It's how they make their money. And the more you do that, the more the TV networks want to keep re-upping, or these streaming services want in on their business. That's the lifeblood of all their cash, right? What's the lifeblood of college football or basketball? Recruiting. What's the lifeblood of pro sports now? Time. Yours, sitting on the couch watching their events. And football is still the only event where you can put arguably the two worst teams on television. You could put the Giants right there now with Tommy DeVito. The Bears and Panthers on Thursday Night Football. And I've said forever, football's not going to stay on top my entire life. Hopefully it does another 20 years, because I'm in the prime of doing this, and I can do this into my 60s talking about football, and it rips and roars. But there's going to come a time when I'm alive, assuming I live a long time, that football will fall off. Not off a cliff, but will come back to earth. Nothing stays on top forever. Whether it's Rome or whether it's fucking Pepsi and Coke, things ebb and flow. Doesn't mean you can't have a long shelf life, but this will be, and they're in the prime of it right now, of being the only event where you can get 10 million people to watch. 9.2 million people. Now, granted, these were the best team in the league over the last 5 years, the Chiefs. In the Miami Dolphins, one of the more fun teams in the league over the last 2 years. On television, did almost 10 million people at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. 9:30 a.m. on Sunday Eastern Time. That's pretty crazy. That shows you the power. Now, this is going to test it. Thursday Night Football on Amazon, Bears Panthers. Now, I could act like a tough guy and be like, if I didn't do this for a living, I wouldn't watch. I would. I would have it on my TV. I would, I'm sure if I didn't do this for a living, I would probably play fantasy football. I definitely, I might bet this anyway. Kind of like the Panthers in this spot. Not really, but actually I probably wouldn't. It's a hard game to bet. But regardless, I would have it on. Just like most of you. We'll just have it on in the background. And that's the power of the NFL. You can put two teams that are starting not Tommy DeVito. That's the Giants. The dude from Shepherd College, Bagenit. I always screw up his name. But one thing the Panthers have, even for being probably headed to have the worst record in the league, they got Bryce Young. who was a superstar in college. That's another element that the NFL has separated from, for example, basketball. College football is the second biggest sport currently in America. So Drake May and Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. and all these players get to become stars, right? It's the big issue I have with live golf. But what the PGA Tour does is it creates stars. At live golf, you can't create any stars if you just buy them all. Part of having a league is creating stars. What is CJ Stroud becoming before our eyes? A potential NFL star. But the dude was already a big-time star in college because he played at Ohio State, multiple-year starter. They have that built-in advantage of having college football being so massive. All the biggest brands produce the most NFL talent, and we get to watch them and know them. Like when I was a kid, all the guys playing in the NBA, I knew. Why? Because I watched them play college basketball. From Allen Iverson, Shaquille O'Neal, to you name it, right? And obviously the one-and-dones changed the game and then going straight from high school, which I'm not saying I actually care. It's another thing. Media people are always like, that is not right. That is not fair. It's not about fair or not fair. It's just about what is the best for the business. And right now for the NFL, the best thing that could ever happen to the business, whenever I hear media people like, there shouldn't be a draft. Fuck that. The reason this is all about interest. Everything we do is about having people care. And what does the draft do? It creates interest. Fair or not, I don't know. I don't even give a shit. I just care about how important that moment is for the lifeblood of everyone in the league. That helps lead to more money for everyone. Does it suck that some guys have to go to teams that they don't want to go to? Sure. But does it ultimately, if that guy turns out to be good, lead to more money in his pocket? Hell yeah. So I just think that Thursday night will test us. But ultimately, even if it's the lowest rated game of the year, I think it still shows the power of the league. Don't miss the action this weekend when the Colts and the New England Patriots head to Germany for the NFL Frankfurt games. These games will air on NFL Network and stream on NFL Plus. For a limited time, Verizon customers can get Netflix and NFL Plus for $25 a month with Plus Play. That's $120 in annual savings. Plus Play is a platform where Verizon customers can shop, manage, and save on the subscriptions you already love, like NFL Plus. With NFL Plus Premium, you get access to live games on mobile, NFL Red Zone, and NFL Network, which means you can catch the Frankfurt games and save. Just go to Verizon.com/thevolume to bundle and save before the games. Hurry, this offer ends soon. Again, that's Verizon.com/thevolume. And another story I saw today about All-Star games, forever to play in an All-Star game, East-West Shrine game, obviously the Senior Bowl, you had to be a senior. You had to have graduated college or have used all your eligibility as a player. So a lot of times when you go to the East-West Shrine game or the Players Union Bowl or the HBCU All-Star game or any of them, it was maybe a couple. I mean, the Senior Bowl had the best prospects, but on a given year, maybe a couple first rounders and a lot of second to seventh round players, right? And today they announced that underclassmen, so for example, Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr., or any guy that has more years left of college eligibility, is eligible to play in these games, which in theory is like, God, that's awesome. Well, none of those guys are going to play in the Senior Bowl, right? No guy that's going in the first round who's an underclassman would risk playing in that game. There's not a lot to gain, especially a top 15, 20 prospect. So that won't change much. Now, all of a sudden, you're not going to see Drake May and Caleb Williams playing in these games. Where I do think you will see guys is some underclassmen, and I don't blame them, don't like school. I'm like, this is a waste. I don't want to attempt to stay eligible. NIL's cool, but like, I just want to play in the NFL. I'm ready to go. But based on my resume and my tape, my agent and everyone's telling me, you're going to be a third or fourth round pick. Before, if that guy came out early, the only way he could increase his stock is the combine and the pro day, which has nothing to do with football, right? Belichick has famously said forever, like, we don't pay you to bench press and run 40s, pay you to play football. So that's where the Senior Bowl, I mean, there have been guys, obviously, like the Lane Johnsons, Aaron Donald, Ziggy Ansahs, who have gone there and just dominated. You're actually playing football. You're in pads, going live in practice against other guys who are going to be drafted high. So I would expect a lot more of those guys, the third, fourth, maybe even a second round guy, to have the opportunity to be like, what if this guy just shows that he's an equal and goes from like pick 60? Like, maybe we should think about this guy at the end of the first, early in the second round. So I think the headlines will be like, Caleb Williams is now eligible to play in the Senior Bowl. Caleb Williams, or whoever that is, Trevor Lawrence, or you name the player, will never play in that game. Nor should he. He has nothing to gain. But the random guys, and they're not random once they're in the NFL, but the underclassmen who are not locks to get drafted in the first round, and maybe even the second round, to me, should and will play in those games. A couple other things. I saw today Al Michaels said that he plans on coming back in 2024, that he has no desire to step away, and that, like John Madden, when he no longer feels he's good at it or has the same passion, he'll walk away. And I want to say this, and I say this over and over with Al, he's an all-time legend. He's an all-time great. It's hard. There might be the rest of my life a couple versions of Al Michaels, right? Maybe. Not even. It's going to be harder to, because back some of the games he called, whether it was the Quake World Series or the 1980 hockey, like there just aren't as many just important moments that all of us are watching. It's so segmented. So there might never be another Al Michaels. But I was thinking about, like, the shitty part about being shot at your job is, like, everyone knows it before you. And I compare him a lot to Marv Albert. Marv Albert is a fucking legend, like an all-time great. When I think NBA, I think Marv Albert. By the end, Marv Albert was terrible. He couldn't say guys' names. He didn't know what was going on. Think about it from a playing perspective. Peyton Manning is one of the greatest players any sport I'll ever watch in my entire life. I loved watching Peyton Manning play football. I loved, when I worked in the NFL, talking to people that had been on teams with Peyton Manning, that had worked either in the front office or on the coaching staff with Peyton Manning, and just talking about Peyton Manning. But that last season was not Peyton Manning. I went to a game when the Raiders played him, and he could barely throw the ball. Charles Woodson, ironically, picked him off twice in that game. Had never picked him off in his career. And one of the picks down the sideline, I remember just watching it float in the air. Now, Peyton he was never Brett Favre throwing the ball. But, like, that was not Peyton Manning. That was a shell of himself because his arm was done. No different than, like, because I saw Florio wrote, everyone's going to miss him. Yeah, we missed the Al Michaels, just like we missed the Brent Musburger, or we missed the Marv Albert. Just like that last year, even though he did win the Super Bowl, his team did. Von Miller, Super Bowl MVP. That was not the Peyton Manning. Like, the Peyton Manning we missed was years before. So I know it's hard, and I don't know, if not saying that Amazon's going to have better options in terms of name recognition, but in terms of, like, this version of Al Michaels, and it feels like I'm talking shit, and I'm really not. Like, his career is unprecedented. It's beyond special. He's one of the rare guys that I don't care who you are, you just liked listening to call your sporting events. But this version that we're hearing now is not that guy. He's just not. So, I understand why. And listen, he can talk shit about social media and everyone being negative on it all he wants. And there's some truth to that from a macro level. But about his specific situation, they're not wrong. I bet a lot of people listening or watching have been in an accident. I bet a lot of people have been into an intense car accident. And let's face it, not knowing who to call for help is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Because Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm with over 100 offices nationwide with more than 800 lawyers. They've recovered over $15 billion for over 300,000 clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. They've been fighting for the people for over 35 years. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is so easy. That's the key. Not having representation is hard. Fighting with Morgan & Morgan is easy. If you've ever been injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/John or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. That's FORthepeople.com/JOHN or pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. The other thing I saw is the Manning cast. The Manning cast. And I was thinking about this because the other night I was at home. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've loved Arnold's entire life, like his entire career, from lifting and pumping iron to easily my favorite action hero of the 80s and the 90s. I've watched every Arnold movie 50 times. I can't get enough. To now this version of him hanging out with his donkeys. Lola, and I forget the other donkey's name, and the donkey came on, and I saw it going viral, and I tried to watch it for a second with Peyton and Eli. And let me say this. I love Peyton and Eli. Like I said, I was a diehard Peyton Manning guy. I've always had a lot of respect for Eli Manning. I would love to hang out with him. I'd love to drink beer with him. I'd love to golf with him. I'd love to have him on the podcast. But as a viewer and as a consumer, because that's what I am first and foremost, no different than anyone else, when I was just trying to watch the Monday night game, I remember loving them when they first came on because the broadcast was atrocious. It was unwatchable. From the Booger to the Jason Witten to the greasy Lewis. And listen, I work with Lewis, but him and Levy, like that, it's just that was not what this is. Like this, you turn it on with Troy and Joe, feels like a real high-level, big-time NFL broadcast. It might not be Madden and Summerall, but it's relative to the rest. It's pretty damn good. And it feels big again. And I noticed as a consumer, like I used to for that year, every time they were on, just watch the Manning cast. And I tried to watch with Arnold. I'm like, there's always a little delay. It's always a little awkward. I'm like, I don't even want to watch this right now. Not because I don't want to hang out with Peyton or hang out with Eli or even hang out with Arnold. I just don't. I just want to watch the fucking game. And now that the game is much more fluid because of the broadcast, and listen, you got to give credit to ESPN. They may be, burning cash at a rapid rate, but hiring those guys away from Fox might have saved Monday Night Football. And I think a big reason that the Manning cast, their viewership has been cut in half over the last couple of years. And it's kind of understandable. And I think a big reason for that is it's reflective of Joe and Troy. It's much easier to just watch the broadcast. And let's face it, like if I wanted to just watch those guys host a podcast and bullshit, it'd be easy, but I'm actually trying to watch the game. And I think about this, like when I've tried to watch, the McAfee do college games, and I don't blame these networks for trying. I don't blame these guys for doing it, trying to be entertaining. But like when I'm trying to watch a game, I just want to watch the fucking game. I just want to watch the game. And then after, if these guys want to give their after reaction, then maybe I'll tune in, right? If it's good enough. But during the game, just too much going on. I just want to watch it. And I think the consumer has shown that they're in agreement. They just want to watch the game. Why? Because it's much easier to watch. There's no more broadcasters that should not be in that situation. I don't blame any of those broadcasters for accepting those jobs on Monday Night Football. They 100% had to say yes. None of them should have been on it. That product is, Troy Aikman, John Gruden, John Madden. It's a big time show. We're talking 15, 20, 25 million people. It's one of the biggest shows we have in America, and we have my entire life. And ESPN got cheap for a minute, and it backfired. And in fairness, like when Gruden left, they were kind of screwed, but they kind of got their swag back. And you can talk, listen, if you don't like Buck or Aikman, I get it, but I think even you would have to admit that, like, they feel big time.